Hey, you are now listening to the Graceway Podcast. Let's talk.
Hey everybody, welcome to Let's Talk. I'm John Baxter. I'm the executive pastor here and get to hang out with Pastor Tim, and we're going to be talking about gratitude today. So Pastor Tim, I'd love for you to start off and can you just give us a definition? Like, how do you define gratitude so we can all be on the same page here with what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think that gratitude, there's obviously an emotional component to gratitude, this swelling up of, warmth around good things or good people or good circumstances that creates this thing in us that is positive. But whenever you study it biblically, there's almost no mention to the emotion or the feeling. It's always active. There's always a response to a giver that's even behind a circumstance or a thing that has an active component to it. So there's sacrifices of thanksgiving, there's songs of thanksgiving, there's the voice of thanksgiving, there's prayer with thanksgiving, there's all of these things that are not only felt by the recipient but are observed and felt by the giver. So there's really a triangulation in the Bible, this thing, thanksgiving, as expressed by the one who feels it, that it's felt by the one who provided or said or any of those kind of things. In the absence of that triangulation, the Bible doesn't have much good to say, right, about those kind of warm feelings. So the text that we hopped out of was whenever Jesus heals the 10 lepers, and the one guy comes back and falls down at his feet and gives thanks. And Jesus essentially says, where's the others? And just interesting to me to think about because, we could make the argument, especially here in the West where we're so kind of cognitive and feelings based. Well, they felt gratitude, they just didn't come back and say it. And Jesus is kind of like, well, then they must not have felt it. That's right. Because gratitude always has an action in Scripture. And so I think that both clarifies and really simplifies, because I think that whenever we leave it in the, what is this feeling that I have? What are these? It can get pretty murky. But I think all of us know what it feels like to be moved to a place where we feel like we want to articulate some type of what we call gratitude to somebody. And the Bible's like that's what gratitude is, that thing, that action. And really, Martin Luther says that gratitude is the basic Christian attitude. So even there, I might disagree with him a smidge because he uses attitude, although I understand what he's saying. But sure. He's speaking of an attitude that produces an action. And to think of it as the cornerstone attitude action of the Christian faith is a pretty interesting thing to get at.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. And you made and in your sermon yesterday, you talked about gratitude predicts different things and also gives us hindsight to things. Yeah. And probably the big one for me that I'd love to dig in further is you said gratitude predicts empathy. Yeah. And when I think about, well, especially the last, let's just say 20 months.
Yeah, sure.
For me, I feel like I've seen a huge lack of empathy just from people to people. Yeah. And it's been hard. And so whenever you said that gratitude predicts empathy, I thought, okay, well, I'm starting to connect some dots here. But I'd love for you to talk more about that and what you've seen and experienced and maybe how we can be more empathetic through an attitude of gratitude.
Yeah. So, Karl Barth, I don't, love everything that he says, but he talks about the joined nature of gratitude and grace. He says that grace is the voice and gratitude is the echo. And as I was thinking about the text that we went through, I felt like, we only know that the leper comes back as a Samaritan. Mm-hmm. But I felt like as I was meditating on it, but I have a pretty good idea of what comes next. I have a pretty good idea of who this guy becomes from this experience. And I have a pretty good idea, obviously not perfectly, but of who the 9 who didn't come back are, mm-hmm. right? You can picture them kind of just going about their lives and that memory kind of fading away. You feel like you can predict that moment was catalytic for the Samaritan who came back, that moment of gratitude. And so what I had tried to say was gratitude protects me from some things, entitlement and comparison. Maybe we'll talk about those things, but it also predicts some things. And so the big one is that gratitude predicts humility, because humility is always a response to something or someone that I don't feel like I deserved, right? Yeah. And humility always predicts empathy. So Paul says, hey, to the church at Thessalonica, I want you all to, do your work quietly and like a mind your business kind of deal. And so what I had tried to unpack was, when I mind my business in the way that the Bible tells me to, I really square to the reality of my own depravity, of my own sinfulness, of my own lack of lots of things. And I swear to the grace of God as a Christian to those realities. And whenever you take you mind your own business and God's grace in it, it doesn't mean that I ignore you, which is what we think mind your business means. It means that when I bump into you, me minding my business helps me understand you, helps me root for you, helps me trust that God has good things for you, whether I agree with where you are, where you're coming from, or any of those. Yeah. Because I've seen him do it in me. And I think that whenever we lack empathy, we forget gratitude. And I think we see that. And I think it would be wise of us to say, I've seen it in other people these past 20 months. I've seen it in me in these past 20 months where I get spun up about any number of things, and I come to conclusions about where other people are based on lots of things, as though, somebody else or God himself doesn't have lots of those moments for me that he was long suffering with. And so, as I studied gratitude, I just felt like, wow, this is not a compartmentalized thing. This is a contagious thing. Lots of things become true if you're a grateful person. And I think empathy is certainly one of those. But we, could go lots of places.
Yeah, we could. Hearing you talk about gratitude, there's so much that I would say when we look at the Bible, and we're always looking for the historical context of how did this apply back then compared to how it is now. And I would say gratitude is one of those things that I don't see a big divergence from what was happening during the writing of it versus our current society.
Right.
So what would you, when you look at different things like cultural context and things like that, you've traveled quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you've seen gratitude do, because to me it seems like a universal language, but what have you seen in other countries, other cultures, and how they express gratitude?
Yeah, I didn't talk about this in my sermon on this past Saturday. This 20-year study came out on emotional intelligence in the West and how we're on this like precipitous drop in EQ. Our IQ is up, our EQ is like off a cliff. Yep. And they tied the drop in EQ, they tied it to technology, but really what you could tie it to is affluence. Because a lot of our tech stuff, a lot of the progress that we've made is tied to lots of other things that come from privilege and affluence and abundance and all these kind of things. And I thought it was so interesting because, especially in the West, many of the things that we're hopeful for, stability and comfort and status and all of these kind of things, the things that we're hopeful for, once we get them, are the things that steal EQ from us and that we're not grateful for once we have them because we feel like we've earned them. And so when you talk about different cultures in this very interesting way, we're the richest country in the history of the world, gratefully, not as we're both grateful to live here. You serve our country, have served our country in the military. That this isn't that, but the abundance does not produce equivalent gratitude for us. And anytime that you go back through history, you see that happen. You see the more powerful a person or a place gets, empathy goes down, and empathy is one of the markers of EQ, right, of emotional intelligence. And the reason that emotional intelligence goes down is that the abundance and the gratitude did not stay in lockstep with one another. And so something that I see when I travel is less stuff, but higher gratitude. Mm-hmm. And I watch as people come here, and you see it switch. You see the more stuff they get, the lower their empathy goes, the lower their EQ goes, because the lower their gratitude goes. We just get used to having so much that we forget. We forget, even as Christians, the grace of God in providing for us. Yep. We start to think, I built this, I did this, I earned this is my right, those kind of things. And then when pressure is applied, like it has been in the last 20, 22 months, a lot of those things come out in pretty ugly ways. Entitlement comes out, lack of empathy comes out, lack of humility comes out. And we kind of lose our way. We lose vision, because gratitude, the Greek word for Thanksgiving is Eucharistia. So we remember, we look back as Christians to go forward. And I think that it's been interesting just in my own life, as COVID squeezed, we all became a little more right in our thinking. We're running around, we're experts on things we're not experts on. We're all a little bit more right. Our empathy goes down a little bit. Our gratitude goes down a little bit. And with it, so did our vision. Like we're stuck in a lot of ways. And I just felt like, as I was studying it, gratitude produces, it feels retroactive, but it's not. You can be proactively gratitude. And when you do, you're both looking back and forward at the same time. And so I'm off the rails in terms of your question, but I think to specifically answer your question, it's less stuff, higher gratitude equals typically higher empathy, higher humility, and those things are baked in culturally. Yep. And I think anytime Americans travel, especially Christian Americans, we come back and we say these kind of things, we don't really know why. I think that's part of why.
Yeah, we gain new perspective.
Yeah.
And I love where you went with that question.
Sure.
And I'd be curious. So let's take that to the next step. Then, if we're talking about being proactively gratuitous and thinking of gratitude, can you give us some practical steps, or maybe some things that you do or that you've read about that, hey, here's things that people do to keep themselves in a state of gratitude, or to proactively work themselves toward a state of gratitude?
Yeah. So two, and both of them, nothing really profound about it, but it's actually an old monastic habit. It's these times of prayer during the day. So I've talked about on this podcast that I try to do that. So I have a morning, I have an afternoon, I have an evening, and I have a night prayer thing. And it's just as simple as, it's a 5-minute prayer, and it is a recap of, in the morning it's God, this is everything that's coming up, and then the afternoon, the evening, and the night, it's a recap. And it's a recap of, ideally, it's a recap of things that went well and gratitude around it. And it's a recap of things that didn't go well, and Holy Spirit helped me to learn, helped me to see, helped me to all of those kind of things. And so rhythms. And then the other would be, and it's a little cliched, right? But you hear people gratitude journaling, right? Ending the day with, 3 things that I'm thankful for. And that can get rote like any rhythm, but it is a commitment to perspective that is really healthy in its proactivity. Because most of us, and I said this yesterday, I talked about entitlement, talked about comparison, talked about regret. But most of us, the reason that we struggle with gratitude isn't that we aren't, it's that we just forget to express, because we don't have some of these rhythms that push us into remembering.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's good, while you read your Bible and pray and go to small group and all those kind of things, to also, if you do believe that gratitude is as powerful as I'm espousing, then what's a proactive rhythm for you to daily kind of put yourself in proximity to it?
Yeah, I think you and I have talked. Well, last week we were talking about the practice of just being present.
Yeah.
And see the good.
Yeah.
And try and what is it that you're giving me right here in this time?
Exactly.
And that's hard.
It's hard. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's really a discipline.
It
is what I would call it. And I had somebody just this last week tell me thank you for sending them a thank you card.
Yeah.
Which I thought, but I think that's a lost practice that we see.
agree.
You know, super simple, but just sending a thank you card makes you reflect on that gratitude.
It does. And you're as hard charging and as high discipline as you are, that is something that's a lesson that you've taught me. You've done that, you know, as long as I've known you. I've gotten multiple. I'm sorry I haven't reciprocated. I feel thankful, but, you know, like, it's my own point here.
Yeah, thank you for that action.
Yeah. Thank you for your hypocrisy, Baxter. You have done that. And it is amazing. This is part of the thing. You're bringing up such an interesting point here. The power of gratitude in that somebody did something that you felt compelled to write them a thank you card. Yeah. And when you gave it to them, it produced gratitude in them.
Yes.
And so it doesn't take much for the weight of gratitude to really become a beautiful and contagious thing. But we just have lots of things that push us away from it. Not just culture, but I think even in the spiritual, I think the enemy knows if this person gets as grateful as as their theology says,
that's right,
I'm gonna have a problem.
Big problem.
A big problem. And so, you know, we keep ourselves busy. He keeps us distracted. We don't have good rhythms and disciplines. And next thing you know, I'm not wandering because I don't believe. I'm wandering because I didn't have a way to remember. Mm-hmm. So
I look at gratitude and really I see the bridges that it builds.
Yeah,
I think of some of the meetings you and I have sat in with, either with each other or other people, and by starting off the meeting, thanking them for coming, thanking them for having just the heart posture that they do to be able to have what could be a hard conversation. You just see it build instant bridges.
You do.
And which I think goes back to that humility and empathy. Yeah. And now we can get on a different playing field that definitely the enemy is really insecure about.
Agreed. That's a great way to say it.
So I love the fact that there's no coincidence, I don't think, we're doing gratitude here as we we come off the heels of Veterans Day and being thankful for what veterans have done, and we head into the Thanksgiving season, we head into Christmas and New Year's. So there's a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah.
What would you tell us as we head into that season, maybe that you didn't get to say yesterday?
Well, I said it, but I said it. I didn't really get a chance to develop it as much as, because, you know, I think that everybody's trying to diagnose what happened to them during COVID, and there's some complexity to it, right? And there's lots of different ways that we try to articulate it. But, you know, and I said yesterday, you saw a lack of humility in public discourse. You saw high comparison, in all kinds of forms, the rich to the poor, the liberals to the conservative, like all kind of, you saw lots of regrets come home to roost, right? I had time to think about it then. And you saw a decrease in empathy, like a violent decrease in empathy. And all of those feel like big rocks, but when you put all of those symptoms on the table biblically and say, here's spiritual doc, here's all my symptoms, I feel like God says, oh, you don't have gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And as I was saying, I can feel my face getting hot even saying it, because I know that is true in my own experience in COVID, that there was many things that were happening that were good, that I was fixated on things that weren't. I was fixated on the economy of what I shouldn't have that I do have, or the bad things that I have compared to the good things that I have. And it produced a lot of fruit in my heart that I was having a hard time tracing it back like, what is this? What's this pride? What's this regret? What's this angst and anger to people who don't, lack of empathy? What's this lack of vision? I said to you many, many times, I feel like I can see further than ever, sort of. I can't reach as far as I can. Like, vision is funky right now. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this week God was like, oh, you're not grateful. I was like, no, I am. I feel grateful. And then he's like, read the story again, son. And there was this, this moment of like, oh man, I'm one of the 9, even during COVID.
Yeah.
I'm one of the dudes who, I deeply love my wife. I have incredible kids. I have the job that I've always wanted. I have friends, like you, that are just friends outside of work, but I get to do this life calling, deeply providential and fulfilling work with you and Pastor Brandon, and, people that I deeply, deeply love here. God's provided for our needs, during COVID. I have an incredible amount to be thankful for. And during COVID, I think so many of us lost sight of the goodness of God because some momentum stopped around those things, Yeah. Some things came to a halt, and I think that I didn't have the rhythms to remind myself during. And so I think that my heart, my hope for Graceway, for anyone who's listening to this, is to do some diagnosis to what really happened in your heart during COVID. Own some of the things, pick one. For me, it was all 4, comparison, lack of humility, lack of empathy, regret, there's a reason they ended up in the outline. And those symptoms are indicative of a lack of gratitude. And the good news is, as Christians, we have so much to be thankful for. It's like, just pick the ball back up. And what you will begin to see is, I think, spiritual momentum pretty quickly around some of those things that have been lost. And I think that momentum produces hope, and that hope produces peace, and that peace produces gratitude, and the ball can get rolling pretty quickly. So my prayer is that this remembrance of gratitude can produce hope, which has been in short supply these past 22 months, and that God can encourage us through that.
Yeah, and I love we asked you for some simple practical steps, and I love that morning, noon, and night, which is essentially our meal times here in the States, that just take a moment, and they could literally change our life, but change our church, our community, our world, and simple but not easy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think my hope yesterday was to try to convey, this is way more powerful than you think that it is. Yeah. And so, we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. I think if Dr. Jeff was here, he would have some profound statement at this moment.
He would.
And so everybody's missing Dr. Jeff right now.
We are.
And you got John Baxter instead. So. I'm sure we could keep talking about gratitude, but I appreciate you being honest and vulnerable with, like, your outline was your outline, not, you weren't preaching at anyone. You were really sharing, here's what's been going on with me, and be helpful to us. So thank you for that. And I appreciate that. And I'm grateful for you.
Likewise, bro.
Graceway, we're grateful for you. And we hope that you're listening to us next time, that you have a great upcoming Thanksgiving.
Thanks for tuning into the Graceway Experience. Hope we can talk again sometime.